Our opening words this morning are from Norman Naylor. Do not leave your cares at the door or in the time before you signed into this Zoom room. Do not leave there your pain, your sorrow, or your joys. Bring them with you into this place of acceptance and forgiveness. Place them on the common altar of life and offer them to the possibility of your worship. Come then and offer yourself to potential transformation by the creative process that flows through you and all life. Amen. We invite you to settle into worship as we play some gathering music.
It's not loud enough. You heard me, right?
Good morning. My name is Karma Amos, and I'm honored to serve as the minister of the Unitarian Universalists of Central Delaware and to welcome you to worship this morning. Whether this is your first time with us or you are here with us every Sunday, we are glad that you're here today and hope that you'll find room in this community for your spirit. We continue to be grateful for the technology that allows us to worship together online and to continue to build community in other ways. We'll ask that you forgive us today for any glitches or delays that we might experience. They should only last as long as it might for someone to move from their seat to the podium when we gather in person. In addition to our worship each Sunday at 10, we meet on Tuesday nights at 7 for a more informal time of check-in and sharing. Please consider joining us for that gathering. And by way of announcements this morning, I want to remind you that our children's religious education program will be meeting at noon. And I want to take the time to say thank you to Kelly Blanchies, who leads that program and has done so faithfully on Zoom throughout this time of remote gathering. I also want to thank Aaron Turner, who assists and guides our children in simple, creative, and effective meditation techniques each time they gather. One final announcement, we have a worship committee meeting on Thursday at 5:30 p.m. on Zoom, and anyone is welcome to join us as we continue contemplating and shaping our common worship. So if that's something that you'd be interested in even observing or contributing to, please consider coming. The link for joining that was in this week's e-blast, and if you have any questions, you can contact one of our worship co-chairs, Judy Kling or Molly Keogh. Now I invite you to take a deep breath and listen to these sincere words of welcome. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you've been, whatever you've done, whatever your religious beliefs are or aren't, and wherever you physically are on the planet right now, you are welcome in this spiritual community. However you move in this world, how much or how little is in your bank account or wallet, and however you're feeling in these moments, you and all of who you are welcome in this spiritual community. Let us worship together.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Don Mears, and I'm a member of the Unitarian Universalists of Central Delaware. We light our chalice, symbol of our faith, for truth sought through a questioning heart and an attentive mind, and for love pursued through obstacles inside and outside our own human heart, and for forgiveness in all it entails, a place where truth and love meet and merge. Please join me in the unison affirmation, and the words are in the chat box. Love is the spirit of this church and service its law. This is our great covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please join us in our opening song. We encourage you to sing along in your own environment. There is something set free in us when we dare sing, no matter the quality of our voice. And besides, no one can hear you if you make a mistake on Zoom. This song is from the UU of Ann Arbor and its music director, Glenn Thomas Rideout. And it's based on a poem from the ancient Sufi poet Hafiz. How did the rose ever open its heart and give the world all its beauty? It felt the encouragement of life and light against its being. Otherwise, we all remained too frightened.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open.
Good morning. I'm Judy Kling and co-chair of our worship committee. This morning, our Story for All Ages video is about forgiveness. It doesn't answer all the questions, but it might help us expand our thinking about what forgiveness means, who it's for, and what we do with our complicated feelings. While simple and meant for kids, this video might help all of us.
Sometimes someone might do something mean to you. That person may not say they are sorry. You might be left feeling angry and upset. When you are hurting, your mind can fill with thoughts that make you feel worse. Your mind can be so full with these sad, angry thoughts that there's no room for happy, loving thoughts. Remember to say to yourself, even though I can't always choose what happens to me, I can always choose how I respond. You can choose to feel better. You can choose to forgive the person who hurt you. You can even feel compassion for them. Maybe they acted in a mean way because they have been hurt too. When you make the choice to forgive someone, you are letting go of your sad and angry thoughts. When these thoughts are gone, your mind is free and clear like a sunny day. By letting go, you make room in your mind and heart for happy, loving thoughts and feelings. You can start by having gratitude or thankfulness for all of the good things in your life. When you choose to let go of hurt and anger and feel grateful, you feel better immediately. But what if those sad, angry thoughts sneak back in and try to cloud your mind again? That's okay. You have the power to change those thoughts. Just like changing the channel on the TV, you can change the thoughts in your mind to happy, loving thoughts again and again. The more you practice changing your thoughts, the easier it is to do. You will be stronger and have a clear mind and happy heart. You will be able to make good, loving choices. Choosing loving thoughts over angry thoughts takes courage. You need courage to be grateful, even when you are hurting. It takes a lot of courage to forgive when the person who hurt you doesn't say sorry. And you must have courage to reach out to help someone who is sad. Courage plus gratitude plus forgiveness plus compassion in action equals choosing love. Let's decide right now to choose love.
Good morning, I'm Molly Keogh. I'm Judy's sidekick on the worship committee. That was a great video. We come to the part of our service which we call the UU moment. And for our UU moments in the month of February, in honor of Black History Month, we'll be sharing some brief bios of famous Unitarian Universalists of African heritage. This week, we'd like to tell you about Fannie Barrier Williams. Fannie was born in Brockport, New York in 1855. So she grew up during the and after the Civil War. While she felt largely accepted as an equal in her predominantly white hometown, she quickly discovered that no matter how talented, educated, and polite she was, her race made her a second-class citizen. In Washington, D.C., where she herself was a teacher, she decided to take a painting class. She discovered that her art instructor had erected screens to separate her from the white students. Thinking things might be better in the North, she enrolled in music school in Boston. The principal there told her she had to leave because white students threatened to quit if they had to go to school with a Black person. Fannie met and married a young lawyer, and they moved to a predominantly Black neighborhood in the South Side of Chicago. Herself a gifted musician and artist, Fannie advocated for those in need, especially Black women who had a hard time finding work and providing for their families. She was herself a person of relative privilege, and having many white friends, tried to persuade them to offer some of these women work. She discovered that just because some people had Black friends did not mean they were willing to give them opportunities to prove themselves skilled and competent workers. Fannie Barrier Williams became friendly with Jenkins Lloyd Jones, minister of the Unitarian Church of All Souls, where she became an active member, helping to organize their social service to all, regardless of race. In 1893, when Chicago was hosting a world exhibition, part of that was a World Parliament of Religions, a gathering where people from all over the world could learn about one another's religions. She discovered there were no women of color on the planning team, and she fought to change that. Eventually, she not only became a member of that team, but was invited to speak. Her speech, entitled Religious Duty to the Negro, urged churches to do a better job of practicing what they were preaching when it came to justice, especially for Black people. She became famous and was invited to give this speech everywhere, sometimes pairing it with a piano concert. All her life, Fannie Barrier Williams fought the racism that kept Black people from jobs and education and to fully realize themselves. She is proudly placed among our UU ancestors, and we are proud she is there.
Thank you, Molly. It's now our time of joys and concerns when we offer one another the opportunity to share very briefly what is most on our hearts right now. Life's celebrations, life's concerns. As you do so, we invite you to light a candle in your own space. Through the action of sharing and kindling a flame, we give energy to our best thoughts, meditations, sympathies, celebrations, and prayers. We hold these as sacred in our collective hearts. So at this time, we invite you to change your view on Zoom to gallery view in the upper right corner of your screen so that you can see everyone who's here. As you feel led, please unmute your microphone, share your joy, concern, and light your candle if you have one. You can watch the mute signals of each person's video stream to see who is unmuted and who's muted. It's best if we share one at a time, and please mute yourself after you have shared. We light one final candle for the joys and concerns that were not spoken by those of us here today, and in solidarity with others in our community who could not be with us today.
A central part of our worship in person and online is the opportunity we all have to practice the art of generosity and the spiritual practice of gratitude. Our gifts to UUCD are what allow our congregation to thrive with the common vision to nurture our spirits, build community, and change the world. We are grateful to you for the many ways you support our community, including your financial pledges and offering. Your gifts matter, and it's one of the ways that you make the world a better place. So thank you for your passion and your generosity. For those who are making pledges or who want to contribute to this community, you may continue to write checks and mail them to us, or you can give online. There are instructions for both of these things on our website, uucd.org. Just click Support UUCD on the menu bar. You can do this now during our offertory song or any time that's convenient. So now enjoy the offertory music.
I got the call a day that I didn't want to hear, but I knew that it would come. An old true friend of ours was talking on the phone. She said you found someone. And I thought of all the bad luck and struggles we went through, how I lost me and you lost you. What are all these voices outside love's open door? Make us throw out our contentment and beg for something more. I'm learning to live without you now, but I miss you, baby. The more I know, the less I understand all these things I thought I knew. I'm learning again, baby. I've been trying to get down to the heart of the matter, but my will gets weak, and my thoughts seem to scatter, but I think it's about forgiveness, forgiveness, even if you don't love me anymore. All the times are so uncertain. There's a yearning undefined. People feel strange. We all need a little tenderness. How can love survive
Our centering today comes from Edward T. Atkinson. As we pause for our time of centering, take a few moments to settle into your body. Notice and feel your breath in, out, in, out. The rhythm and sustenance of life. We are here. We have brought with us into this time of worship everything that is on our minds, our hearts, everything that is held in the tension in our muscles, in the habits we have formed, in the fears, responses, and hesitations that routinely shape our lives. Most of these have helped us survive. The question is, are they still? In this spirit of openness and questioning, let us offer this prayer and meditation. At this quiet time and in this place of worship, we would seek to know more deeply what it means to love one another. We know so well our own needs. We know that we ourselves need understanding, affection, and recognition. Why is it then that so often we hesitate to extend these precious gifts to others? The cost of a kind of word is small. The moment that it takes to listen could hardly be better used. A gesture of forgiveness can mark a new beginning. An embrace or a note of appreciation can convey crucial encouragement and comfort. And yet, so often, we fail, even within our own families, to live by the sacred command that we should love one another. O Spirit of life and of love, strengthen our faith, increase our resolve to give more generously of ourselves. We pray for the courage to take the risk of love. We pray for the insight to see ourselves and others in perspective. We pray for humility and understanding that we may always stand ready to forgive and begin anew. Breathing in, breathing out. Imagining our hearts and minds and bodies opening to possibilities. Let us center ourselves.
Our reading this morning is from Gretchen Haley, a Unitarian Universalist with an audacious ambition for the liberal church, believing in its capacity to transform lives and our world. Gretchen writes, as a child growing up Catholic, my sense was that we should give away forgiveness like candy at Halloween, freely and readily, to anyone who comes asking. As an adult Unitarian Universalist, however, I've realized that forgiveness is a lot more complicated and challenging than that image would imply. What should we ask of those who have hurt us before we offer forgiveness, if anything? Must someone seek your forgiveness in order for you to forgive them? What if they can't or won't? What about self-forgiveness? Is there a point where something or someone is beyond forgiveness? What about forgiveness of a group, a community, or institution, or life itself? Forgiveness is connected to memory and time. It asks us to engage our feelings about something in the past in order to change our experience in the present and to move into the future. Forgiveness is an act of vulnerability, both from the one seeking forgiveness and the one offering it. And it reveals the risks of trying to love in an imperfect world.
So we're talking today about the topic of forgiveness and asking why it's so important. And I should confess right up front that I'm not at all finished thinking about or exploring this topic. Frankly, I doubt I ever will be. I've struggled with what it means to forgive, when forgiveness is appropriate and needed, whether or not there are limits to it. I've thought about its implications for individual interpersonal relationships, relationships between groups of people, and even between nations. I have tried, with varying degrees of success, to practice forgiveness in my own life, to offer it to those who've hurt me, to forgive myself for the things I've done that I wish I hadn't, ways that I've harmed others, or for just not being perfect. There's no getting around the fact that forgiveness is exceptionally hard work. And yet, I believe it really does matter, and that it can have deeply healing effects on people individually and on relationships, from the personal to the familial to the international. Nearly all religious traditions have something to say about forgiveness. Some have quite a lot to say indeed. And all of them, in my study, either promote or require forgiveness as an essential part of what it means to be faithful. According to Judaism, if a person causes another person harm, they need to apologize sincerely. And if they do that, the other person is religiously obligated to forgive them. However, even without an apology, forgiveness is always considered a pious act, an act of love and faith. Yom Kippur is a day that focuses each year on atoning, righting wrongs, making things right. And ways to do that, to cease doing harmful things, or to confess or apologize to those who've been wronged and start over again, fresh. In Christian tradition, forgiveness plays a key role in the spiritual life. The so-called Lord's Prayer that Christians pray both individually and together at regular times, often daily, says, "Forgive us our sins or debts or trespasses, as we forgive those who sin or trespass against us." There's a reciprocity to it. Jesus has encounters with disciples who ask him, "How many times must I forgive?" And then, thinking themselves generous, they suggest 7 times. It's a pretty big number. But Jesus says, no, you should do it 77, or in another place in scripture, 70 times 7. The point probably being that you must practice forgiveness over and over again until you're no longer counting. And of course, the story goes that while he was being executed, he asked God to forgive those who were killing him, for they know not what they do. In Islam, forgiveness is a prerequisite for the genuine peace Muslims are always seeking. In cases where forgiveness is an option, it is always considered the better way. The Quran says that although the just penalty for injustice is an equivalent to retribution, those who pardon or forgive and maintain righteousness are rewarded by Allah. The Buddha was reported to have said that hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. And many Buddhists believe that without forgiveness, we are chained to the past and remain caught in the hurt and pain of our history. In Buddhist psychology, forgiveness is thought of as a way to end suffering and bring dignity and harmony to our lives. There's a story that's often told in Buddhist circles of 2 prisoners of war who meet again after many years after the war had ended. And one asks the other, "Have you forgiven your captors yet?" And that person responded, "No, and I never will." And then the one asking the question replies, "Then they still have you in prison." Forgiveness is also a key theme for humanists who talk about the response many of us have when we are deeply wounded. that construction of walls to protect ourselves or stave off pain. They say, though, that if we do that, we may become cynical and closed, separated from others and isolated within ourselves. But forgiveness can be a powerful way to reclaim our loving hearts. Humanists often tweak that famous quote from Alexander Pope, which says that to err is human, but to forgive is divine. And they say instead, to err is human, and to forgive is also human. This acknowledges the fact that we are capable, we humans, not only of committing terrible atrocities and small meannesses against one another, but we are also capable of compassion, generosity, and grace. And being humanist, of course, they note that forgiveness is meaningful and beneficial, even without some supernatural mandate or intervention. I could keep going, but you get the point. Nearly every spiritual tradition includes this core teaching that forgiveness is essential to a healthy life, and that it's also so difficult to do that we have to intentionally and regularly practice it to maximize its benefit for ourselves as well as others. Excuse me. Now I want to share a couple of stories of forgiveness with you that have had a big impact on my thinking about this, and ultimately on my own practice of trying to forgive. In 2001, as part of my seminary experience, I took a cross-cultural trip to South Africa for the express purpose of studying forgiveness. Now, the history of South Africa is likely well known to you. I know many of you have been there. The history with its experience of over 40 years of apartheid, racial violence, and structural injustice that lingers still today. So you can understand why this might be a great context in which to really grapple with the concept of forgiveness. South Africa's Archbishop Desmond Tutu, whose living room I was honored to visit for a meeting of local activists. He worked with others in leading the country to a process of applying the principles of forgiveness as national policy. It was a compromise position, something between the extreme approach of the Nuremberg trials, which turned the tables in retaliation against those who perpetrated injustice, and on the other hand, an approach of national amnesia, which would effectively ask people to simply forget the horrors of the past and move on without properly processing them. So the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established to mediate this third way, which would grant amnesty to individuals in exchange for full disclosure about their crimes. Now, it was by no means agreed upon by everyone that this was the right path or that it would be effective. It was certainly a deeply emotional and disturbing process for many, and many continued to ask, what about justice? And in response, the commission helped to distinguish between retributive justice and restorative justice, the latter of which they concluded was the morally superior option and the best way to move forward. I reread my journal from that trip this week in preparation for today, and I had forgotten how awkward it felt to be talking to the people of South Africa, from living rooms to college campuses to churches, to be talking with them about their experience of forgiveness nationally. This was just months after the terrorist attack on 9/11. Talking to them felt just, so conflicting, because at the very same time, the United States was in the midst of a retaliation campaign against Afghanistan. Very different approaches, to be sure. And tucked into that journal was a copy of the famous picture taken during the Soweto uprising, when police opened fire on a group of Black school children who were protesting a government decision. And the picture is of Hector Peterson. You've likely seen it somewhere. Hector was a 13-year-old who was shot and killed, and in the photo, he's being carried in the arms of two of his school friends who were running through the streets in fear. When I was in Soweto, I had written on the back of this picture, "Can this be forgiven?" How many times? And I have to say that the question has even more resonance for me now in our current reality of systemic racism and the killing of Black bodies in the streets of the United States. In his book, No Future Without Forgiveness, Tutu talks about a time when he visited Rwanda as the invited guest preacher at the All-African Conference of Churches. It was just a year after the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, when at least 500,000 people were massacred in the span of 100 days. Before his sermon, Tutu visited a village where a group of Tutsi had been mown down in a church, and he describes the scene where the skulls of the slain were still stacked as a macabre monument to the viciousness that had occurred there. And when he addressed the conference later, which included the president and many dignitaries in attendance, he talked to them about forgiveness. He told them that the history of their country was typical of the history of top dog and underdog. The top dog wanted to cling to its privileged position, and the underdog strove to topple the top dog. And when that happened, when the power players changed, the new top dog engaged in an orgy of retribution to pay back the new underdog for all the pain and suffering that it had inflicted when it was top dog. And the new underdog fought like an enraged bull to topple the new top dog, storing in its memory all the pain and suffering it was enduring, forgetting that the new top dog was, in its view, only retaliating for all that it remembered it had suffered when the underdog had been its master. It was a sad history of reprisal provoking counter reprisal. And then he told them that cycle of reprisal and counter reprisal that had characterized their national history had to be broken. And that the only way to do this was to go beyond retributive justice to restorative justice, to move on to forgiveness, because without it, there was no future. The president of Rwanda, the new president of Rwanda, responded to Tutu's sermon graciously, but also by contradicting his message and insisting that some things were simply unforgivable. Now, Tutu marveled that the parliament and the new political leadership of Rwanda did not rebuff him more strongly than that, because he knew full well that his call to forgiveness was a very unpopular opinion. And he said he thinks the only reason they listened to him at all was that even in the midst of all their anger and pain and confusion and desire for retribution and revenge, they also knew that something had happened in South Africa that gave them reason to pause and wonder, could forgiveness really be what is necessary? Could truth and reconciliation actually heal them? A few years later, I watched a documentary some of you may have seen called Forgiving Dr. Mengele. It tells the story of Eva Moses Kaur, who along with her twin sister Miriam was a survivor of Auschwitz and the torturous human experimentation that SS Dr. Joseph Mengele performed in his study on twins. Later in her life, Eva came to a famous and very public decision to forgive Dr. Mengele and the Nazis who had harmed her, killed both her parents, killed her two older sisters, and killed 6 million other Jews, as well as other oppressed groups. Eva's declaration of forgiveness caused an outrage on the international stage from other Holocaust survivors who did not think she had any right to do this and who found it profoundly disturbing and inappropriate. She had many heated conversations all around the world with others of the surviving Mengele twins. But ultimately, she spoke about the power of forgiveness as a global activist up until her death. She founded and ran a very small Holocaust museum in the city of Terre Haute, Indiana, where she lived most of her adult life with her husband, also a survivor. I was so moved by her story that I called up the museum and she herself answered the phone. As it happened, I was working with a number of other religious communities to plan a rally on the National Mall in Washington having to do with forgiveness. And she said yes to our invitation to be the keynote speaker. I will never forget that speech and just how genuine and inspiring she was as she described why she chose forgiveness. And one of those reasons was that she was feeling stuck in her feelings of resentment and actually suffering physically because of the stress it was taking on her body, mind, and spirit. This part of her story is actually quite a good illustration for author Anne Lamott's belief that not forgiving is like drinking rat poison and waiting for the rat to die. It poisons and harms the person withholding the forgiveness, not the one who wronged them. Now, Eva's experience of forgiveness was quite unlike South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, for she never received an apology from Dr. Mengele or any kind of acknowledgement of the torture and violence she and others endured at the hands of the Nazis. Which leads me to emphasize that there is at least one key difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, and that is this: reconciliation takes at least two parties. Forgiveness takes only one. A person like Eva, who has been violated and hurt, can do the work of forgiveness all on her own without the perpetrator even knowing about it. And that's what she said, never underestimating how difficult it was for her to do this work, to write letters to those who had done terrible things to her in the camps, which was part of her process. She said that forgiving them was the only way for her to become free and to become a happier and healthier person. Eva and so many other people have learned that the path of forgiveness does not have to end in some happy reunion between abuser and abused or offender and victim. Of course, it may, but one can remain absolutely committed to the end of an unhealthy relationship with no desire for reconciliation and still go through a process of forgiveness that will help them in their personal journey to healing and wholeness. There are countless other stories I could tell, but I know you have your own. I invite you to remember them and see what they may have to offer you in this time of reflection. There's always more to learn. For me, I am reminded that forgiveness is a process. We all approach it differently and not on the same timeline, or any timeline at all, really. It's a bit like grief. Each person, each family, each nation may go through it in stages, which is not so linear a journey as it might seem. And it may also be like grief because it involves grief. A well-known saying, variously attributed to different people, says, "The past is over. Forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past." And there's loss involved in that process, that giving up. And grieving loss is complicated and emotional and messy. Not such an appealing notion, if not for the fact that at the end of that process, one can emerge freer, less burdened or stuck in feelings of regret or anger or agony, and more open to emerge with compassion, empathy, and a clearer idea of how to move forward into the future, able to live more fully, to love more fully. I'll end today by sharing just a couple more things I think I've learned about forgiveness from study and personal experience, and mostly from the process of getting things wrong and trying again. First, the act of forgiving is often not a one and done activity. We may have to come back to it again and again, perhaps because the person or system that's wronging us continues to do so multiple times, or perhaps because it takes repeated efforts to remain in a state of forgiveness for the same hurts that are not so easily healed. I think the question, how many times should we forgive, may apply to both of those scenarios. And secondly, the words forgive and forget do not belong together. Forgetting has not to do with forgiveness. We must remember, in order to honor the truth of our experience with its particularities and its emotions, forgiveness simply seeks to free us from being stuck there in that remembering or in that pain. It may ultimately also help us integrate the lessons we've learned and become more loving, compassionate people. That's a bonus. Now, I mentioned at the outset of this reflection that I'm not finished thinking about this topic and probably never will be. Thus, I have no tidy ending to these thoughts today. What I do have is the encouragement to myself and to you to keep thinking about forgiveness, to consider whether or not we may need to practice forgiveness for ourselves or for others who have harmed us. Because my wish for you and for me is that we might be untethered from any past grudges, resentments, or pains that hold us back from living abundantly and joyfully. May it be so. Our final song today is called Wo Ya Ya, and it's found in the UU's Singing the Journey, or the Teal hymnal, as we call it. And Wo Ya Ya means we keep going in the Ghanaian language called Ga. The words will be pasted in the chat box so you can sing along.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will. We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know we're there. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. But we know we will. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going. We know we're there. We will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there. We know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going. We'll know we're there. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
As we leave this gathering of heart and spirit, let us go in gratitude that we have for one another. Let us go mindful of the gift of community that is compassionate and strong enough to hold our questions as well as our convictions. Let us go committed to continuing the work of loving one another, searching for deeper wisdom, practicing forgiveness, and creating the kinds of lives we want to be living. Let us go in peace. Our virtual worship has ended, but our connection to one another and the earth endures. Go blessed to be a blessing for others.